Wrestling fans, promoters, wrestlers, and anyone who enjoys pro wrestling now have something new to be excited about. The Wrestling Fans International Association, the WFIA, is back. WFIA is an association that exists to promote, grow, and support professional wrestling throughout the world. Membership is free. Your membership includes a free digital bi-monthly publication of the Wrestling Fan News newsletter, association updates, voting privileges, and much more. Please go to thewfia.org, that's thewfia.org, and become a member today.
Welcome, everybody, to the PWZ podcast. This is Rick Del Santo. I've got a very special guest here today, someone that's very involved in community radio and has his own podcast, Wrestling with Heart. I'd like to welcome to the show, Stanley Karr. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Rick. Thank you for having me on. It is a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And, of course, I appeared on your podcast, and that will be reaching the pod waves as of some time soon, and I just want to thank you for that as well. But today we're going to get into this show's about you today, not about me. So why don't we talk a little bit about your history and what kind of what got you involved in professional wrestling or interested in the world of professional wrestling?
So I have always been a fan of professional wrestling, probably my whole life. I first was exposed to WWF when I was about 5 years old. This was like the heart of the Attitude Era. Rock was like the top star at the time. Austin had just gone on injury. I think he broke his neck, but The Rock was on one night, and my dad was watching, and he was cutting a promo on The Big Show, and the rest is history. I mean, just this larger-than-life guy with the sunglasses and the shirt and the fancy clothes. I mean, who knew that this guy was going to be a Hollywood superstar, man, because he was just really charismatic.
Yeah. And that was a very interesting time. Do you still go back and watch Attitude Era stuff?
I do. I definitely do. I'm kind of more of a Ruthless Aggression era guy because I've spent more time watching that period, because I had got into it like around, this was like I caught the tail end of the Attitude Era, so that's still right. I still consider that a part of my childhood, but the true period, like when I actually was like going to shows, starting to go to shows and actually get like really invested, was like Ruthless Aggression era. But I definitely enjoy the Attitude Era stuff as well.
Yeah, my thing is I try to go back, and I'm not trying to badmouth the WWF by any means, but I try to go back sometimes and watch some of that Attitude Era stuff. And at one time it was very popular for the time. I just don't, my personal opinion, it doesn't hold up to that status, I guess. You know what I mean? There's a lot of times I sit there, it's like, how did this get over? How is this on TV? How is this so popular? Because sometimes it shocks me, some of that stuff that now maybe I'm older and I have children and married and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it might be semi inappropriate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you also have to look at the times we were living in. I mean, back then, like, shock culture television was the in thing. Like, extreme sports was in. Yeah. Just a far cry from today's environment that we're living in. So you have to understand, like, that was the product of the era.
Yeah, a little bit more open-minded, I guess you could say. And
yeah,
like you said, shock TV, reality TV is also a gigantic thing today. But I think that in its infancy, it was one of those things that was kind of everywhere, and people were using a lot of that. It was carrying over in the wrestling world.
Yeah, you definitely saw a lot of stuff that pushed the envelope.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. So you did all that stuff. So who were some of your favorites when you were growing up? What were you into
So
besides WWF? Did you catch? I'm sorry to cut you off, but did you catch like any of the Monday Night Wars? I know you said you were coming in there in the tail end of the Attitude Era.
yeah, I mean, I didn't really get a chance to watch WCW or ECW much. I had a Goldberg action figure, like that was it. But I
Yeah.
didn't really get to see much of the other side. Unfortunately, I was tuned into WWF, like Raw, SmackDown, Sunday Night Heat. I would watch that constantly. I kind of took a break, like a little bit after the invasion angle, and I kind of regretted the fact that I did because I missed out on some good stuff. But I was very fortunate to have still caught the Ruthless Aggression era because I feel like you still got some good wrestling and good storytelling out of that time period.
A lot of it was focused on the actual wrestling aspect as opposed to a lot of the craziness, I guess, if you will.
Well, you still had some of that. Like that was
Yeah.
still around, but yeah, there was definitely more of an I would even argue that the in-ring work definitely was a big thing towards the tail end of the Attitude Era because that's when guys like Guerrero and Benoit and Dean Malenko all jumped over. Chris Jericho was there, Kurt Angle was there. The in-ring aspect of it, I would argue, probably started around 2000, and it just went up and up and up in the years since, the years after that. So you definitely got a lot of good in-ring action following the year 2000.
And the whole thing with was it Angle and Guerrero, they put on a great series of matches as well. Like I went back and watched that probably 2 months ago, maybe, because I was reading something about it. I mean, those two performers were phenomenal. You just could not say anything wrong about those guys. Was fantastic, but there's a reason why he's called the GOAT. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I remember when he had passed away, I was just devastated. And I just remember being upset and emotional that whole week because this was a guy that had, like I said, charisma and just incredible showmanship and a character and was funny. He got to do a lot of skits and stuff. The whole lie, cheat, and steal gimmick was hilarious. I enjoyed watching it. The stuff with Kurt Angle was good too. I mean, who can forget Eddie stealing a lot of Kurt's memorabilia and like auctioning it off and things like that, and Kurt Angle in the lowrider with the smoke kind of coming out and getting smoke in his face. I mean, that was funny. I mean, that was good stuff. Just some good television around that time too between those guys.
I remember when he died, like, and I was working at the time. I was at work, and my friend had actually called me I worked for Walgreens at the time, the pharmacy, and my friend had actually called me on the store phone that, a coworker, just to tell me that he had saw on the news that Eddie Guerrero died. And I just remember being so upset at that time period. But then, a year later, then Benoit would die as well with with the tragedy, with the Benoit tragedy. And that just kind of like, I didn't know what to think at the time. It was crazy because I felt like those are two of the greatest professional wrestlers of that era. And Benoit, still to this day, I know he gets a lot of flack and because of that, and it's understandably so. But he's still to this day one of my favorites, and I will go back and watch his matches every so often.
Yeah, kind of like you. I didn't know quite what to think of the whole Benoit situation because we had just gotten over losing Eddie, and that in itself was a terrible loss for the business. So for another guy under contract to die, just sent a lot of shockwaves throughout the industry, and you definitely saw a lot of stuff started changing around that time period as well. But those were two just incredibly gifted athletes, and to lose both of them within 2 years of each other, that's just heartbreaking.
It was a very dark period for the professional wrestling business as a whole at that time.
Yeah, WWE by like the mid 2000s. Well, they bought out WCW in 2001.
Correct.
You didn't really have. I mean, you had Impact, you had TNA just come up. That became a thing. You had Ring of Honor, but there was really no competition for almost 20 years.
As great as TNA / Impact was, during some of the periods. I mean, I know they suffered quite a bit as well for creative issues, but you know, I wouldn't think that they were ever viable competition in Ring of Honor either. They were, on a much smaller audience, but it was for the pure wrestling fan that kind of, you know, like the actual wrestling aspect of professional wrestling and not so much the entertainment. They like to be entertained by two gentlemen in the ring putting on a pure wrestling match. And TNA was, it was kind of WCW-ish in a way. But I don't think that they were able to, they were never, and even still to this day, they were never able to get to that level of being a actual competitor to WWE, WWF. As great as they're doing really good now, it's not the same thing. You know what I mean? They've tried many times. They tried going head to head with Monday Night Raw at one point, which failed miserably. After like 6 weeks, they just decided to pull that concept, and they're their own thing, and they should just concentrate on being their own thing.
I definitely see AEW growing. I think that company has the potential to be a worthy competitor to WWE. A lot of young talent there. I think they've got a great TV deal right now with the Turner Networks. So we'll see what happens when the next contract comes up and it's time for renewal, because I think they've got a good product.
Yeah, I was a really firm believer in the earliest days of AEW in the first couple of years. It's just this last, I wouldn't even say last year. It's probably the last 10 months that I haven't been watching it as much. I do tune in every so often. It's usually the pay-per-views. I have not watched last night's show as of yet, which was Full Gear at the time of this recording. I have not watched it as of yet. I'm going to probably get to watch it either later today or tomorrow. But, the pay-per-views are pretty good. They put on a long show, however, and it's just something different. And it's not something that I'm always into. And I'm not going to argue, because I feel like, they don't need to go down that sports entertainment route of WWE if they want to be successful.
Yeah, every company should be different in some form or fashion to attract new audience members. And
yes,
AEW's got their thing. It's great to have another company out there with a big TV deal. Impact is doing its thing. NWA is another one. I think they're growing and they're getting some traction. MLW. So there's a lot of companies. Japan, oh my gosh. There's a lot of companies. It seems like now there's more wrestling out there than there was even when I was growing up.
When I was growing up in the 1980s, so I'm significantly older than you, I will fully admit that. There was a lot of wrestling on TV between the NWA, AWA, WWF, World Class. We'd get some independents up here on TV, like the ICW. We'd get Florida wrestling up here. Then there'd be, sometimes it'd be like a one-off promotion that would last 6 months or something to that effect. But now it seems like there's wrestling on every single day of the week now, between some sort of streaming service, live cable TV, and then gigantic pay-per-views each and every weekend. Game Changer Wrestling hosts probably 2-3 shows in a weekend. Of course, there's the NWA, which I am I'm a firm believer in the NWA. I've been an NWA fan through its different incarnations over the decades. It's just, there's a lot of wrestling, and it's really hard to keep up with everything.
It is.
It's impossibly hard to keep up with everything, but I sit there, I read a lot every single day, and I try to watch at least a little something on a daily basis. Not always, but a little something.
With the advent of social media and technology, it's definitely become more accessible to check out your favorite products and hear the latest news on your favorite wrestlers. Like, this is a big contract season coming up. A lot of free agents. Yep. We've had people switch back and forth, whether it's guys like Edge, whether it's someone like a Jade Cargill. Now MJF, his contract, I've read, is supposedly going to be up at the end of the year. I don't know where he's going to sign, if he's going to stay with AEW or jump to WWE. Who knows? It's very interesting.
My thing is how much of that is a work, and he's trying to just get the most money out of either company or get even more money out of AEW. That's the other thing. So my thing is whoever offers him the most money, that's who's ever going to get him, and that's what the name of the game is about in professional wrestling, really.
Yeah, I mean, he is someone that's just like a generational talent, like a once in a lifetime superstar. Yeah. He's got the look, he's got the charisma, the character development. He's got all the makings of a true professional wrestler, and he's someone that I'm a fan of. I've become a fan of in recent months, in the last couple of years. He's definitely grown on me for sure.
Yeah, I've been a fan of his pretty early on. I liked his attitude and his willingness to keep kayfabe, and he's like you said, generational talent. He's an amazing professional at that. So.
Hi, this is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my years at Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. Well, now I've started a brand new podcast called The Outdated Wrestling Hour. Yes, we're going to take a whimsical look back at the wrestling figures, stars, and trends from years gone by. We're talking 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and a whole lot more. There's going to be laughs. There's going to be fun. There's going to be action. You name it. Please tune in for The Outdated Wrestling Hour, wherever you get your podcasts.
So you grew up where?
So I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. I spent a good part of my childhood up in the Northeast, the Maryland, DC area. I went to my first show when I was 9 in a town called Frederick, Maryland. It was WWE. The Raw brand came to town. This was like when they first did, a couple of years after like the first brand split had started. So they had Raw and SmackDown, which they still do today. But back then they had like, what I would call like they kept like the rules kind of, it wasn't as wishy-washy as it is today with some of the rules, but they had like the Raw crew all show up. And I remember attending that show as a kid, and it was a lot of fun. And
yeah,
I moved back to Nashville the following year, went to an independent show in the area, and then I started going to more shows. And I went to my first WrestleMania about almost 2 years ago in Dallas. That was a lot of fun. And I'm actually planning to go back next year to Philadelphia for WrestleMania 40.
I might be there. So if
really?
If I do, it's undecided. It's undecided at this point. So if I do, then we're gonna have to hook up at one point. At least for a couple minutes. At least for a couple minutes.
I may run into you at a convention because I'm planning to go to WrestleCon and promote my podcast. So we might meet up for sure.
Yeah, and I saw. Are you going to WrestleCade? Is that what you're doing?
I'm going. Yeah. I'm going November 25th. I don't know when this is going to air, but November 25th, I'm going to be appearing at WrestleCade at the Benton Convention Center in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So come on out, say hello. We'll have all kinds of things for you to check out, information on the podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I did New England Fan Fest earlier this year. That's another one that's coming. The new one, this year they held it in July. They're holding it in February of 2024. We're going to be there again, bringing my buddies to the House of Pain. Great tag team from this area up there. We're going to be going up. I don't know if that's up or down. It's in Rhode Island. Either way,
oh, cool.
It's going to be fun. So, so you're actually a Northeasterner. Well, grown in Nashville, but you moved up to the Northeast. And you mentioned going to your first independent show. Do you remember anything about that independent show? Because I was a fan of the independents.
Well, I went to my first independent show in Nashville. Actually, it wasn't in Maryland. I went to my first wrestling show was a WWE show in Frederick, Maryland. Yeah. But you would ask me about my independent experience. I went to a show in Nashville at the fairgrounds. I believe it was NWA. It was like an anniversary or something like that. Okay. But they had just a lot of talent there. I'm trying to think. Lexi Fife was on the card. I had her on the podcast a while back, so she was awesome. She defended her championship. I believe Abyss was at that show, if I'm not mistaken.
It sounds like it's one of the anniversary shows. The NWA. Yeah, so it was probably maybe the TNA era, maybe, or maybe after the TNA era.
It was kind of around that time, but I don't think there were a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think there were anybody from Impact or TNA that were at that show, except maybe Abyss. But it was a
Right.
lot of guys from the independent circuit from the Southeast. It was good.
Yeah.
I liked it, and
Yeah.
and the thing about an independent show, it's got like that intimate experience. You don't really
Right.
get that kind of thing at a mainstream show like WWE, where you can meet the talent maybe 15, 20 minutes before the show. I mean,
Yeah.
you got all kinds of people, big names that show up now at these events. It's like you can get their autograph, say hello.
Sometimes
20
you're just walking
minutes.
around in the crowd with,
Yeah.
doing
I
whatever.
mean,
Yeah.
where else can you find that? I mean, that's very
Yeah.
unique, and I
Yeah.
think that's awesome.
Yeah. Do you now where do you live now? Are you still in Tennessee or were you
I'm definitely in Tennessee right now. Yes.
okay?
Still
Do you attend any of the independents down there currently?
Not recently, but I have gone to
Yeah.
some other ones in the past. There was one show
Yeah.
I went to a few years ago, benefiting a wrestling team at a local high school. That was pretty cool. Gangrel was on that card. I went to a
Nice.
couple shows at the fairgrounds in the past. Teddy Long was the GM at one of those shows. MVP was there. Angelina Love was there. I believe John Morrison was at that show, and Buff
Mhm.
Bagwell.
Okay.
That was a pretty cool show.
Yeah. Tell me about your radio career. You've now we spoke not so long ago, and you're
Yeah,
I believe you're the head of a community radio station.
yeah.
Is that correct?
I'm an assistant at a local
Assistant.
community college radio station in the Middle Tennessee area. Just kind of wear a lot of different hats, and
Yeah.
I do some on air work and help volunteers and things like that. It's awesome, and I also do a show for a small station in the nearby in a town called Hendersonville, Tennessee, for WHIN radio. I've been working there as well, and yeah, and I also do this local access community radio show called The Piano Men, which is now on its 8th year, going on its 8th year. We just celebrated our 7-year anniversary.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah. So yeah, I've been doing that. That's on Radio Free Nashville, WRFN, low power FM station, and it's syndicated on many stations across the country. And yeah, I love radio. It's an awesome medium.
What made you get into radio? Because I'm myself, I know that when I was on your podcast, we did I
Yeah.
explained how this show came about was I was doing a radio show on a local college station with a buddy of mine that
Yeah.
was music based, and then I wanted to start a music based show, and then it was a chance. Me started to go to wrestling shows again,
Yeah.
and I said, F it, I'm just going to do a wrestling podcast, and it expanded over the last almost 4 years. So tell me about how you got interested and how you got into radio.
I just kind of fell into it because I was studying at the time video production at the community
Mhm.
college where I work now. And so when I heard that the college had a local radio and television program, and you could just be a volunteer and do radio shows, I just signed up and I got involved, and I just all of a sudden just started really enjoying it because I love music. I feel like I know a wealth of music trivia, and I just started doing it, and I had a lot of fun with it. So I just caught the bug there.
That's awesome. What kind of music do you appreciate? I mean, all different types, or do you have a specific genre that's your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, like, I like anything. Like, I like rock music. I like pop music. I've started really getting into country music the last couple of years. Um, some R&B is good. Love the
Yeah.
oldies but goodies.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little mix of everything.
Yeah. So you started a show recently called Wrestling with Heart, which I find very interesting. You've had a lot of legends on your show as of late, and it seems very interesting. You hit me up pretty early on, and I'm glad we're here talking now. We're going to get this word out about this show. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about the Wrestling with Heart show?
So Wrestling with Heart, I had developed that while I was taking a podcasting class at the community college where I work. And so I just attended SummerSlam, and I'd gone to WrestleMania earlier that year. And I think I always knew I wanted to do something wrestling related as far as like a podcast or radio show. And so that was like a while back. But with this class, it gave me this perfect opportunity to find kind of like a hook. If I was going to do a wrestling podcast, what would the hook be? No pun intended, of course. But I was looking at, there's a lot of wrestling podcasts out there, as you know. It's
There's thousands,
so many
probably.
of them, thousands,
Yeah.
thousands of them. So
Everybody's got one. So
everybody's got one. So I wanted to find something for my show that would kind of make me stand out. And what's something that really hasn't really been done before. And nobody's, to my knowledge, and I've researched this endless amount of times, there's never really been a show, a podcast devoted to the act of giving back and helping out in your community. There have been maybe a couple of mini series here and there. I know Dana Warrior did like something a few years ago that was a little similar, but I really wanted to put an emphasis on the community service and volunteering and helping out and just giving back to your community with my show. Or if there was a story that could inspire somebody else, I wanted to do that. And that's kind of what my goal with the podcast was. And I started with 7 episodes, and here we are a year later into it. I've had on several people like Devon Dudley. I just uploaded an interview that I did with Terry Runnels. I've had on Stevie Ray, Al Snow, Wildcat Chris Harris, so many people from WCW and WWE that I've had on, and I plan to have on in the future. And I'd like for this to actually go on radio and make a radio version that I can get syndicated. So that's another goal of mine. So I'd like for this podcast to really take off and actually be something that's viable and something people can check out and get something out of.
I'm looking at your list here. You've had Baby Doll, Nicola Roberts on there. You've had Nikki Chase, Sean Donovan, Flash Flanagan. You've had Ace Darling, a very good friend of mine and the show, Flynn Hendricks, who's currently AIWF television champion. He will remind you of that.
Oh yeah,
on every Facebook post. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. Lexi Fife that you mentioned earlier, Chris Harris, Rip Rogers you've had on, and that was a 2-parter. Jeez. And Rip Rogers is a legend. I'm going to tell you, that guy had so many. That guy, anytime you listen to his podcast or him, his his tweets. The guy offers so much information on the business. Neil Hargrove, who was Reno Riggins, I've had him on here before. We went for 2 hours. That guy's stories were absolutely amazing. I thought about his training and with Tojo Yamamoto and lots of stuff. You just had like a lot of really good, talent on your show. So hats off to you.
Thank you, man.
And then
just trying
it's
to
going to get better. I know there's.
Yeah.
So this has only been about a year.
I started the show September of 2022. So it's been now a year, and I think that, I'd like this to grow, and, going to the conventions, I think would help with that, and just spread the word, with social media around us. That's another tool I feel like is important and vital. And I think it's good to have, we talk about wrestling as well. We don't just talk about charity and community service. We do talk about some of the wrestling as well, but I think it's a different take on the business. It's a different slant, if you will. So I think that's something I feel like is helpful as well.
What made you decide on that to get into the telling the story of that aspect of how they're giving back to the community and such? How did that idea come about? Because I find that very interesting.
Well, wrestlers are people too. We don't really think of that often, but they are people. And I think it's good to have an outlet where we can share the positive side of the business, because you hear stuff all the time about this person dying or whatever the case may be. Right. But I wanted to shed a light on the acts of charity and good thing, like you hear about John Cena doing Make-A-Wish stuff for kids, and you've got Titus O'Neil, who's like the ambassador for the WWE. He's always doing stuff for his community, and so to kind of spread the light and spotlight, give these people a spotlight, I think is important, because these people are trying to make a difference in their community, in their world, and they want to lend a helping hand to somebody who may need it. And in this podcast, not only is for wrestling fans, but for anybody that feels that that they can make a difference in somebody's life as well.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. I love to hear that, because like you said, I know when I was on your show, we talked a lot about organizations here locally that does commentary and some of it production, and a lot of independents hook up with fundraisers and do fundraisers to try to raise money for a cause, if you will. Like the December show that I'm working is we're doing working for a fundraiser that groceries to vets, you know what I mean? So to vets in need. So I feel like that's you can't overshadow, you got to look at the human aspect of professional wrestling and how it can be very positive, because there's actually a lot of negative professional wrestling business, especially on the internet.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with my show, is I wanted to talk some wrestling, but also spread a little bit of positivity, and really not talk about all the backstage drama that you hear and stuff like that. I really wanted to do something that was meaningful and just valuable. So I just encourage anybody that wants to check out Wrestling with Heart. We're on all the platforms, and we're on all social media platforms as well. And we just want to grow the show and make this a success.
Yeah, I want to I want everybody to go out there. There's going to be a link in the description of this episode, so I want you guys to go subscribe to this, give it a listen. He's got a lot of great talent up there, and I mentioned some of them, but this is another guy that was one of my favorites in the 1990s when I was going to independent shows. Ace Darling was on the show. Yeah, I got to see him in Connecticut, and when me and my buddies used to drive to New Jersey for shows, we used to see him and Devin Storm, aka Crowbar, as a tag team a lot of the times. They were in Wildcat. Chris Harris, he's been on this show before. Rip Rogers. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I'm going through the list right here. Like you said, Gary Valiant, who is the son of oh Jesus Christ,
Boogie
Jimmy
Woogie
Valiant.
Man.
Jesus. Yeah, Boogie Woogie Man. I can't even believe that my brain slipped on that. But Herb Simmons, who was here before as well. We went a full 90 minutes. He's another great guy. Of course, a guy you guys are going to know, Al Snow. Legendary professional wrestler, ECW, WWE, now the head of OVW, and featured prominently in the show Netflix series, The Wrestlers, excuse me. So, all right. Thank you, Stanley, for coming on the show. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on the socials?
Yes, so we're on Facebook. Just type in Wrestling with Heart with Stanley Karr. We're always looking to add new followers. We want to grow the page. We're on X at WWHWSK. So find us on X. We're on Instagram at Wrestling with Heart. Also Threads at Wrestling with Heart. And we're on YouTube by punching in Wrestling with Heart with Stanley Karr. We're trying to get up to 500 subscribers. The ultimate goal, as we all are with doing these podcasts, is to make some money. So help us out, and we'll hopefully we can reconnect again, and we'll do a part 2.
Absolutely. This has been fun. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank you for joining me, and everybody go click that link in the description. Subscribe to every single social media platform, and of course, subscribe on your favorite way of listening. It's on all the podcasting platforms. So go ahead and subscribe and give it a listen. I think you're going to have some fun.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.